To make a long story short, we negotiated a legal contract. It was going to be the first, some people refer to it as the first and last paper ever published by Imagineering. But the deal was I go, I provide my own funding, I go for 6 months, I work with a project, we publish a paper. And then we meet our villain. I can't be all sweetness and light because I have no credibility. Somebody's head's going to go on a stick. Turns out that the person who gets his head on the stick is a dean back at the University of Virginia. His name is not important. Let's call him Dean Wormer. And Dean Wormer has a meeting with me where I say I want to do this sabbatical thing, and I've actually gotten the Imagineering guys to let an academic in, which is insane. I mean, if John hadn't gone nuts, this would never have been a possibility. This is a very secretive organization. And Dean Wormer looks at the paperwork and he says, well, it says they're going to own your intellectual property. And I said, yeah, we got the agreement to publish the paper. There is no other IP. I don't do patentable stuff. And he says, yeah, but you might. So deal's off, and just get him to change that little clause there, and then come back to me. I'm like, excuse me? And then I said to him, I want you to understand how important this is. If we can't work this out, I'm going to take an unpaid leave of absence, and I'm just going to go there, and I'm going to do this thing. And he said, hey, you know, I might not even let you do that. I mean, you got the IP in your head already, and maybe they're going to suck it out of you, so that's not going to fly either. It's very important to know when you're in a pissing match. And it's very important to get out of it as quickly as possible. So I said to him, well, let's back off on this. Do we think this is a good idea at all? He said, I have no idea if this is a good idea, And I was like, okay, well, we've got common ground there. Then I said, well, is this really your call? Isn't this the call of the Dean of Sponsored Research, if it's an IP issue? And he said, yeah, that's true. I said, so if he's happy, you're happy? Yeah, then I'd be fine. Like Wile E. Coyote, a little. And I find myself in Gene Block's office, who's the most fantastic man in the world. And I start talking to Gene Block, and I say, let's start at the high level, since I don't want to have to back out again. So let's start at the high level. Do you think this is a good idea? He said, well, if you're asking me if it's a good idea, I don't have very much information. All I know is that one of my star faculty members is in my office, and he's really excited, so tell me more. Here's a lesson for everybody in administration. They both said the same thing. But think about how they said it. Right? I don't know. Well, I don't have much information, but one of my star faculty members is here, and he's all excited, so I want to learn more. They're both ways of saying I don't know, but boy, there's a good way and a bad way. So anyway, we got it all worked out. I went to Imagineering, sweetness and light, and all's well that ends well. Some brick walls are made of flesh. So I worked on the Aladdin project. It was absolutely spectacular. I mean, just unbelievable. Here's my nephew Christopher. This was the apparatus. You would sit on this sort of motorcycle type thing, and you would steer your magic carpet, and you would put on the head-mounted display. The head-mounted display was very interesting. It had 2 parts, and it was a very, very clever design. To get throughput through, the only part that touched the guest's head was this little cap, and everything else clicked onto it, all the expensive hardware. So you could replicate the caps because they were basically free to manufacture. And this is what I really did, as I was a cap cleaner during this sabbatical. I loved Imagineering. It was just a spectacular place. Just spectacular. Everything that I had dreamed. I love the model shop. People crawling around on things the size of this room that are just big physical models. It was just an incredible place to walk around and be inspired. I'm always reminded of when I went there and people said, do you think the expectations are too high? And I said, you ever see the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Where Gene Wilder says to the little boy Charlie, he's about to give him the chocolate factory, he says, well, Charlie, did anybody ever tell you the story of the little boy who suddenly got everything he ever wanted? Charlie's eyes get like saucers, and he says, no, what happened to him? Gene Wilder says, he lived happily ever after. Okay, so working on the Aladdin VR, I described it as a once in every 5 years opportunity, and I stand by that assessment. It forever changed me. It wasn't just that it was good work and I got to be a part of it, but it got me into the place of working with real people and real HCI, user interface issues. Most HCI people live in this fantasy world of white-collar laborers with PhDs and master's degrees, and until you got ice cream spilled on you, you're not doing field work, right? And more than anything else from John Snoddy, I learned how to put artists and engineers together. And that's been the real legacy. We published a paper, just a nice academic cultural scandal. When we wrote the paper, the guys at Imagineering said, well, let's do a nice big picture, like you would in a magazine. And the SIGGRAPH committee, which accepted the paper, it was like this big scandal. Are they allowed to do that? There was no rule. So we published the paper, and amazingly, since then, there's a tradition of SIGGRAPH papers having color figures on the first page. So I've changed the world in a small way. And then at the end of my 6 months, they came to me and they said, you want to do it for real? You can stay. And I said no. One of the only times in my life I have surprised my father. He was like, you what? He said, since you were, all you wanted, and now they got it, and you're like, huh? There was a bottle of Maalox in my desk drawer. Be careful what you wish for. It was a particularly stressful place. Imagineering in general is actually not so Maalox-laden, but the lab I was in, John left in the middle. And it was a lot like the Soviet Union. It was a little dicey for a while. But it worked out okay. And if they had said, stay here or never walk in the building again, I would have done it. I would have walked away from tenure. I would have just done it. But they made it easy on me. They said, you can have your cake and eat it too. And I basically become a day a week consultant for Imagineering, and I did that for about 10 years. And that's one of the reasons you should all become professors. Right? Because you can have your cake and eat it too. Okay? I went on and consulted on things like Disney Quest, so there was the Virtual Jungle Cruise, and the best interactive experience I think ever done, and Jesse Schell gets the credit for this, Pirates of the Caribbean. Wonderful at Disney Quest. And so those are my childhood dreams. And, that's pretty good. I felt good about that. So then the question becomes, how can I enable the childhood dreams of others? And again, boy, am I glad I became a professor. What better place to enable childhood dreams? Maybe working at EA, I don't know. That'd probably be a good close second. But, this started in a very concrete realization that I could do this. Because a young man named Tommy Burnett, when I was at the University of Virginia, came to me, was interested in joining my research group. And we talked about it. And he said, and I have a childhood dream. Well, it gets pretty easy to recognize them when they tell you. And I said, yes, Tommy, what is your childhood dream? He said, I want to work on the next Star Wars film. Now, you got to remember the timing on this. Where is Tommy? Tommy is here today. What year would this have been? Your sophomore year? Oh.
It was around 1993.
Are you breaking anything back there, young man? Okay, all right. So in 1993, and I said to Tommy, they're probably not going to make those next movies. And he said, no, they are. And Tommy worked with me for a number of years as an undergraduate and then as a staff member. And then when I moved to Carnegie Mellon, every single member of my team came from Virginia to Carnegie Mellon, except for Tommy, because he got a better offer.